Yeah. A little bit more formalized. Well, speaking of formalized, welcome everyone to the Lakewood City Council study session agenda for this Monday, April 24, 2023. We have several items for discussion tonight, and the first is a review of the 2022 Transportation Benefit District Annual Report. And I believe our Deputy City Manager, Todd Kraus, is going to lead us through that particular item.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. This is the 2022 Annual Transportation Benefit District Report. We are required to provide this to you by state law. So in 2022, we had transferred over $2,358,000 to 4 capital projects. Those 4 capital projects were the minor and major maintenance capital, chip seal program, Hipkins and Silicon Boulevard, as well as the Ardmore, Whitman, and 93rd project. We estimated the ending fund balance to be $58,424, and we ended up with an excess of $91,140. And you'll see those dollars be allocated as part of the carry forward budget adjustment. So the 2 programs before and after pictures are provided for the minor capital and major maintenance on the next page, as well as the chip seal program. The balances of $112,000 and the $199,000 are in the carry forward for future programs related to the same project. And then for the Hipkins Road and Ardmore project, those expenditures balance $982,000 and $3,240 are also included as part of the carry forward. Not too much to report on the last 2. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions? We've utilized our money wisely, it looks like, on the TBD funds that have been coming in. And just for those who are watching, the TBD is funded by the $20 car tab fee that Lakewood instituted some years ago. And those funds go directly to the benefit of our city streets, as indicated. Any questions? If not, thank you very much for that. We'll now keep you in the hot seat and move to the review of the 2022 year-end lengthy financial report.
Yes, and it is a lengthy, detailed report, but my presentation is probably going to be as short as the TBD report. You have been getting updates as I provide them to the city manager. And overall, I just want to say that we had an excellent year. We've had, if you follow me on page 9, you'll see that compared to our year-end estimates, operating revenues came in at $2,289,000 more than anticipated. And compared to the budget, came in at $3,726,000. And then on page 10.
Did that cover all the snacks the city manager ordered for us?
For the mayor's request,
Okay.
yes.
Just checking, make sure we didn't go over budget.
And then looking at page 10, I'm looking primarily at the ending fund balance. And ending fund balance, we had estimated originally in the revised budget, $13,839,000. The year-end estimate anticipated $15,837,000. We actually ended up the year with $19,388,000. We maintained the reserves per the financial policies. So we've maintained our 12% general fund reserves, as well as the $2 million economic development opportunity fund. And so what's left over, you'll see being spent as part of the proposed carry forward budget adjustment. On page 5.
I just had a quick question on that.
Yeah.
So looking at the bottom of page 10, I was using my abacus on adding these things up. And so we've got the $5.6 million, 12% reserve, right? And we got the $2 million opportunity fund. And then was the 11,000 the total, or was that in addition to? It was the total, right?
In addition to.
In addition to, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That created the 19 million.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And then on page 5, we've had the healthiest ending fund balance, just even looking from 2017 to 2022. Prior to 2017, definitely our ending fund balances were a lot less. and as well as our cash. So both cash and ending fund balance are in great shape. So there's a lot of details on each of these. Some of the major revenue city managers provided you with updates. I'm going to skip over to page 49, and that is on the cost recovery for development services.
Can I ask a quick question on the cash balance?
Yes.
What's our interest rate of return now that interest rates have ticked up a little bit with our bank? Because I assume we're getting something north of 2%.
Yes, it's actually on the last page of this report. Just give me 1 second to get there. This is on page 111. So just for December, so we just kept it for December, we had about $62 million in the government investment pool, and the net earnings was 4.13% compared to the average 6-month treasury bill at 4.16.
That's great.
Yeah, so we've accumulated quite a bit.
Good. That's okay, great.
Yes. Okay. So now I'll jump over to the development services cost recovery on page 49
Who
of
has a
your
question?
packet.
Oh, Mr. Anderson has a question real quick. Thank you.
Real simple question. So on our annual operating revenues, we've increased from basically $6 million from our low in 2020. Is any of the fund or any of the funds represented in that increase a result of what I call leakage or recharacterization of COVID aid to the city? Did any of that change the color? Did any of the color of money, COVID money, change into general fund money and
No,
become a part of that 47 million?
no,
Okay.
all of the, that COVID money, you're talking about the ARPA stuff, or when you say COVID, which are you referring to?
Money that came to us from the federal government.
No, that's a separate. So it's not in here at all.
Because we can't, in certain cases like the police, we can essentially change the color of the money into general fund replacement money.
But we still accounted for it all in the ARPA fund.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so cost recovery for development services. So based on the annual budget, so cost recovery percentage is 85% in accordance with the policy. That is intended to be over a period of time. For 2022, the annual budgeted cost recovery is 75%, and on an actual basis, it was 72%. However, if you look over the 5-year period, the cost recovery is 98%. So that's where we're at.
So I understand that going into 2022, we were doing cost recovery at a rate considerably higher than the target. And so that we've changed the budgeting process down to where we started to look for 2022 for a 75% cost recovery. And that did drive the cost recovery for 2022 down, but it's still above the range, slightly plus or minus of 85 that our target is. So as we are looking at the 2023-24 biennium, where are we setting the budget for cost recovery to, over the long term and that 5-year average, get us in the neighborhood of 85, which is what we wanted to do to both make sure that we were providing quality for what we were charging people, but also recognizing that some of these fees generate things for the public good. So what are we at for this biennium in terms of targeting that cost recovery rate?
Okay, so first of all, for 2022, the budgeted cost recovery based on the revenues and the expenditures is 75%. Based on the actual activity for 2022, it's 72%. I want to say on the top of my head, but I would need to go back and confirm. It is about 85% for the 23 and 24 budget. You'll see I'm working on the first quarter and we have the budget adjustment as well. So those numbers may change, but it is going to be closer to the 85% and not over the 85.
I guess how are we expecting that to get us to a long-term 5-year average that is consistently within the 85 range?
The 85% is a target, and with revenues for permitting, it's not always going to be at 85%. It's going to fluctuate based on revenues, permit revenues, as well as the expenses for resources to carry out those programs.
So let me just say, if we set the target of how we're planning to budget in 23, 24, based on the fact that we're trying to correct the 5-year average to 85, or are we just trying to get those years to 85?
Trying to get those years to 85%.
Mr. Boki.
There we go. Admissions tax, and it says, I don't know if it's page 17 or page 23, page 17 of the presentation, 23 of the packet. And it went way up, and of course we would have expected that. How does that compare from years before?
So the admissions tax, we have the 2020 was at 96,000.
If you went pre-COVID.
Oh, pre-COVID, we're looking more at about, I think at one point we're about 500,000, 525,000.
So we're still well.
Yes.
Okay, so on the franchise, there's franchise fees and there's utility fee.
But can I go back to the admissions
Yeah,
tax? We
yeah.
did lower the estimates as well.
Oh, okay. The franchise fees and the utility fees. So if I go up on the utility fees that are utility tax on page 21 of the 1521, big jump in gas. Was there just better? Did we just a
From
refund
20
or something I'm looking at the end, at the bottom here. 16.5%. Where did gas prices go up that much, or was that just kind of
It's
inflation,
different.
or was it a lot of use, or did we?
It's hard to tell based on
Okay.
the returns that we get. It could be a combination of things.
Okay.
Yeah, so weather, rates. Some people will use more when it gets colder, but if they don't have the resources to pay it, they'll cut back.
No big refunds that we knew of,
No,
and no new big customers that we know.
not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
Okay. Shall I jump to my next section? Okay, I'll jump over to 85, page 85 of the packet, and that is the cost recovery for parks, recreation, and community services. Their target is 45%, and for 2022, it is 46%. Sorry, it's page 85 if you're looking at the right-hand page of the packet.
Okay, we're getting there. Hard for me to talk without a mic, but yeah.
So that's really all that I have to say about parks and recreation. They're pretty much on target. And so I'm sorry, 49% for 2022. Looking over a 5-year period, the average target or the average recovery is 46%. And that's all that I have for the quarterly financial report.
That's it out of 250 some odd pages?
Yeah, because I kind of got tired of looking at it
Yeah.
after putting it together.
Yeah. Well, I just want to
but it just generally overall very good. You'll see more of where the money goes as part of the carry forward.
Right. Well, not just very good, but thank you for all the work. I know your team works really hard to keep the entire budget up to speed, transparent, and in compliance with the financial policies we set some years ago. So we have to say good work on that, even though we know it's laborious to go through. But thank you for keeping the book straight. Appreciate it. It's not always been like that.
No, it's not always been like that. It
Yeah.
was a rough few years coming into it.
Yeah. So we're in much better shape. Thank you. Okay, so any questions? Otherwise, we'll have go on to the carry forward budget adjustment part of the process here.
Okay,
Starts on page 156.
so starting on page 156, the purpose of the carry forward budget is primarily to adjust the estimated ending fund balance for 2023 with the actuals from 2022. It also incorporates items that the city council previously approved but aren't in the budget. And then also projects that are funded by grants, donations, or other contributions, continuation of capital projects that the city council already approved, as well as some new allocations. The one item that isn't in here is the collective bargaining contract for the AFSCME. I think they're starting that or in progress. So we don't have the impacts of those. We don't know what those are until they're negotiated. And then I didn't want to lose sight of the Fort Steilacoom Park H-Barn restoration and renovation construction. Just that we would be applying for the funds in August of 2024 for availability of funds in first quarter of 2025. So on page 158, this is where I think the primary, I think the most important item is in the general fund. The other funds have a specific purpose, and so they can only be spent for those reasons. But before I get into the details of the budget, I do want to say that we do maintain the 12% strategic reserves, the $2 million that the city council set aside for Economic Development Opportunity Fund. And so at the end of 2024, to maintain those reserves as well as the Opportunity Fund, we needed $7,544,000, and we do maintain that with this budget adjustment. I'm not going to go through all of the details, the narrative that was written for this report, so I'd like to jump over to page 185 and just call out a few of the items.
Before we do that, I just want to kind of throw it out there to the council on the Economic Development Opportunity Fund. You know, we set that certainly in good faith at $1 million a year over a biennial budget. You know, by some fortuity, the city has done better in terms of collections and those kinds of things, monitoring our expenses, et cetera, et cetera. Is there potentially any value in us revisiting that to increase that so that we maintain a fairly healthy economic development opportunity fund that isn't static, but actually grows with the successes of the city economically? Don't know if we need to, because we have this chance for the budget adjustment anyway, but it is an intentional fund that we use for opportunities as they arise. I assume if we ever made a decision to do that, this budget adjustment timeframe would be the time to do it, right?
You could do it at this time. You can evaluate the programs that are on here. Another opportunity would be during the mid-biennium budget adjustment.
Great.
You really could do it at any time. But that's the next big one. And then we also, if you're looking at ending fund balance savings, a good time would be in the next carry forward adjustment.
Okay.
Of course, you have the opportunity here too.
Great. All right, just planting that seed.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So page 150, I just covered the ending fund balance reserves for the general fund, and we do meet those reserve requirements. On page 185 is the summary of all of the budget adjustments.
185, you said?
185, yes.
You get there. The reason why it takes me a little time is I'm doing it on the website as opposed to the download, because it doesn't download for me for some reason here. So I'm scrolling on the website portion of the documents.
So for like in the narrative, you'll see if there's a capital project, you'll see what the total funding sources and uses are for that project. So I'm not going to cover any of those. But what I was going to say, once you get there,
Okay.
It's just basically how this is laid out.
Mhm.
I am showing what the adjustment type is, if it's grant funded or if it's continuation or if it's a new allocation. So those are listed, and then whether they're one-time or ongoing. You'll see a number of programs that are new and one-time, and only the M&O portion of it is being carried forward as an ongoing. So that's kind of the layout of this. So starting with the general fund, I have included a sales tax increase of 1,150,000 in 23, and then also in 24, just about 3% increase from where we would be from 2023. And we have seen that consistently, and so I've included that adjustment here. Some other programs that I've included is we have a number of new programs that are, all of these are actually in alignment with the City Council's goals and objectives. But we've included, for example, the comprehensive plan amendment as it relates to housing. The economic development strategy is also a new program for 50,000. The tax increment, I'm sorry, my apologies. The economic development strategy is a carryover, not a new program. It is the financing strategy for the TIP financing strategy that is new. We've also included the multicultural coalition signature event as a new program. We're carrying over the opioid funds distribution that we received until a decision is made on how to spend it. We've implemented the bargaining agreements for Police Guild and the Management Guild. We've also have some improvements that are necessary for the property management fund, such things as the ADA hands improvement, the stairwell reader cards, some generators at the police station. And then we also have in the internal service funds, primarily with the information technology, we have copiers, servers, hardwares, firewall replacements, disaster recovery, storage servers, as well as some managed services contracts and monitoring and detection. Also on page 186, I'll skip down to transfers to transportation CIP. We have a bond issue that is scheduled for the Transportation Benefit District. The funds are not needed until 2024. So what I've done is shuffle some monies around so that we can complete projects that are important for 2023 using proceeds from the Transportation Benefit District. It doesn't have any implications to transportation funded projects because we're not going to be issuing the bonds until a later date. So the debt service just gets delayed. So that's really all that I have to point out in terms of the new programs where the general fund is impacted. The rest of the funds are either capturing their share of the internal service funds or the monies are restricted by the source. So the special revenue funds, for example, if it's CDBG, it can only be used for CDBG. If it's ARPA, it can only be used for ARPA and so forth. So that's all I have in the presentation portion.
Any questions? Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss. On the carry forward of the money for the Springbrook Park expansion for the turf infields. And in looking at that there, and it talks about some improvements, but is any part of this money in this project going to be used to upgrade the parking lot that runs, that sits between the ball fields and Stelicum Boulevard? It doesn't seem to be in the description here anywhere, but it is a associated item, and I know that there are some street items at the entrance to the park that's going on, but
So what I can only address is what I have included in terms of the project scope. And I couldn't tell you if that includes that portion of it.
Okay, and that may be some the wear and tear on the parking lot is predictable, but it may be some years down the road end up as a different project in the parks, I think. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, Mr. Marcella.
Thank you, Ms. Goss, for coming to explain to us. I had a question about whether our city budget adjusts for things like inflation rates, both on the revenue and expense side. I know it can change our ability to spend and to save. Do we make adjustments to our budgets for that?
We make adjustments to the budget and it's documented in the original adopted budget towards the back. You'll see where there are specific line item changes. We also will show what the changes are in the operating budget. So the answer is if there's a need for it and we know about it, we'll adjust it. On the revenue side, we base it on, looking at 5-year trends and then any other circumstances that may have us estimate revenues that are different than what the 5-year trend shows.
Thank you. I wanted to expand a little bit on what the mayor had stated about our $2 million carryover for economic development opportunities. We may want to increase that to correspond with an index. Thank you.
Great. The only other question I had, just looking at the new program monies that you have on page 185. I just needed a reminder about the Lakewood equity map, the $30,000 investment, and then the tax increment financing strategy for 58. So I know that's through community development. What are we attempting to do as best you know with the equity map?
The Lakewood equity map, the Pierce County and City of Tacoma have a equity map. And what we're trying to do is to build the same type for the city of Lakewood. And it really just shows the different layers. I want to say.
Census tracks almost a little bit? Or?
Yeah, and it also has these different elements that are
Mhm.
related to like, I just looked at it prior to this, and actually I think the city manager sent one out a link some time ago, but it'll take a look at different categories and show in those areas, it would show in those areas for Lakewood, whatever those criteria or factors or
As a consultant
measurements.
helping us with this, right?
Yes, the consultant for that. The tax increment financing is the same for a consultant to assist the city
Mhm.
with, kind of helping us determine projects, how it would be funded,
Best
just
use of the
helping us-
tool.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
And we actually just started that project
Okay.
with a team of employees with
Good.
the consultant.
Good. All right. Well, I'm sure there'll be more to follow on both of those. Now we can turn to the non-motorized transportation plan update with Mr. Paul Busich. I think he's appearing via Zoom. Is that correct? No, he's in the back. There he is. He's zooming to the front. Is that? Yeah. Welcome, Mr. Busich.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Good evening. I understand you want to have more conversation about the non-motorized transportation plan.
I live for it.
That makes one of us.
Yeah.
We presented to council on March 20th, the findings and outcome of the non-motorized transportation plan update. I'm here tonight to answer any questions you may have, to further discussion, but there's no presentation for tonight.
Got it. They corrected some of the graphical omissions from the last packet, I assume.
We did. We
Okay.
did made some additions based on council suggested changes, and also found some minor errors that we were able to tweak.
Got it.
Those have now been, along with the document, reloaded to the city's website. And then I provided you with the 3 different graphics that we've updated. And then there was also a request that we look at adding potentially the green loops,
Mhm.
Green Streets Loop, which I think is pretty much by its very nature incorporated into the document, but we'd be happy to add that as another figure.
I think there was other case,
What was that, Mr. Boki?
Gail, who wrote about.
Oh, on Meadow Road. So there was a public comment we all received about, this is something that could be put in the tip for sure on an annual basis, but it was a commenter who wrote a very thoughtful comment about the need for sidewalks on Meadow between, I think, Decoven and Mount Tacoma because of the bus route. And her concerns, as I recall, were that there weren't adequate sidewalks to service those who walk and try to utilize those existing bus stops on Meadow. So her hope was that we would include something in the non-motorized transportation plan that would honor that and would at least connect Meadow to existing transportation hubs, if you will, or stops for Pierce Transit and transit users. Isn't that right?
Is that it?
Yeah, ADA needs and those kinds of things. So I think, let's take a look and just see. I don't know where we are on page 198.
98, looks like it might be.
It's hard to tell here. Yeah.
It's the red between.
Is that the one that's where you see the Y down there between the green?
You'll have to forgive me, I don't have all those streets memorized. but
Right.
If you forward that on to
Neither do
me,
I,
then I can
yeah.
take a look and see if something be added or if it's already on there. But let me just answer her request by stating that there are a lot of sidewalk needs in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't surprise me if someone's asking for sidewalk on a particular corridor, that
Mm-hmm.
we can add it to it. But really what it comes down to is with all this is what's going to be funded. Where the
Right.
funding source is going to be. Because I would love to be able to provide sidewalks everywhere in the community. Right now, the primary focus has been on the main arterials and corridors. And we have that programmed over the next number of years
Mm-hmm.
and funded over the next number of years. As additional supplemental funding comes forward from grant agencies, we take a look at our transportation needs, our non-motorized transportation needs, and we try to match the grant fund to our project list to see what we want to be able to pursue.
But this document's really a planning tool. It's not funding dependent, though,
That's
right?
correct. It is a planning tool.
Yep.
And it should be updated every, thank you, it should be updated every 6 years, as I indicated at the last council meeting. The fact that it went for so long was unusual. And I think that the goal will be to update it every 6 years to incorporate those projects which we have completed
Mhm.
in that interim year.
Sure.
And then add additional projects to it as they come forward.
Even though that one's kind of an off street and I don't know what you call Meadow is what's the proper vernacular? It's not an arterial
A
collector. It's a collector. Yeah. Maybe worth looking at because again, it's a planning tool. It's not necessarily linked to funding, but if it doesn't get on the plan, it'll never get in line for funding. Yeah, 100th and Ardmore. Yeah, it was mostly the bus stop stuff. And I think she had some ADA concerns and, you know, again, from a Pierce Transit Commissioner hat that I wear periodically, not a bad idea to try to at least be intentional about existing transit facilities. And we do pretty well in most of them.
We do. We do.
Yeah. So that was the only thought I had on that one. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Brandstetter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Mr. Visich, I guess that I would just tell you that I understand that the plan is not a funding document and it isn't designed to put together projects in a timeline or an order or even fully prioritize them. Its idea is to get things on the long-term picture of how we're going to create the walkable city that we've been working towards for many years and that citizens want us to keep working for. And so I was sort of surprised because I'm one of the council members who wasn't here in 2009, so I didn't get the original burst about how this proximity index works and how you would do the scores, and I just haven't had trouble visualizing it. But I did expect the plan to sort of reflect some of the priorities and things that are in the comprehensive plan. And we had been working over the last couple of decades, working on the long-term thing about focusing on the arterials in the city to get them up to the standards that are in the comp plan as the corridors that they were, so that all of the 6 major or 7 major arterials that are listed in the comp plan were designed to be developed with sidewalks and going forward. And we've actually been really working ahead on that. So, we sort of got Bridgeport Way finished, and we're the Pacific Highway and South Tacoma Way, Lakewood Drive, Gravelly Lake Drive, and we're in the midst of dealing with Washington Boulevard and Stellicum Boulevard. And Stellicum Boulevard is a pretty phased pieces, but we've got plans to do that. But in this plan, when it was published, then it gave the impression that we were looking at stopping prioritizing on that. And the 2 areas that I was looking at was on Stellicum Boulevard, that there's an area between the Custer Ardmore intersection, and it goes to the east to about Gravel Lake Drive and Stellicum Boulevard. And that had remained an area that we'd occasionally got citizen comment about, when are we going to get the upgrade of that stretch of Stellicum Boulevard to be essentially a civic boulevard, which is what the comp plan calls for. And I noticed that in this particular version of the plan, I'm looking at the figure of, with all the different things in the plan, and that section shows that there are some sidewalk segments not connected along that route, but it isn't one of the things that are in the plan to have proposed sidewalks. That seems a contradiction with the comp plan that indicated that those arterials that would be there. The other arterial that seems to be not covered by the figure 5.1, which is the overall picture of the plan, is Military Road, where it's an arterial, was identified to be a civic boulevard, have sidewalks and things to do that. And it has always been said that Military Road was the arterial that had the least I guess the least competitiveness for grant funding, so it was going to end up being somewhat towards the end, but I didn't think that should justify taking it, since it's still in the comp plan that way, of taking it out of the non-motorized transportation plan or not including it in the update to the non-motorized transportation plan. You know, it is a stretch of road that should, when I was trying to interpret the priority proximity index, you know, it is along a bus route. It is within the buffers for parks. It's within the buffers for schools, has a school zone on it, being able to go and do that. And it is a major arterial with the traffic volume to get in many of those categories, the maximum number of points. So, you know, I would think that that would be something that it would be even recognize that it will be challenging to fund, perhaps. That you know, that we should stay the course of the original idea of the city is to get all the arterials up to Civic Boulevard status in terms of pedestrian and vehicular movement to be able to go and do that. I think that one other thing that as I look at the revised 5-1 and I'm trying to think how I would use this and try to explain it to citizens, is that there is the legend has both existing pedestrian facilities and proposed pedestrian facilities. And I'm kind of really wondering what the definition of existing is. The basic existing means it's there, but I guess that we are also including as existing, and I guess that I understand ones that our construction has begun on. So, you know, we've done that, you know, for instance, if you look at Washington Boulevard, it's listed as existing, and that'll be the case based on a project that's there, that's physically ongoing doing that. Perhaps the existing facility, thing that I don't understand is it shows that the shared youth path from Tillicum to Ponders is an existing facility. And that would be hard for me to explain to people to be able to go and do that. So is existing is part of the definition of existing meaning that it's funded?
Sorry, the question is, when we say existing, there's two ways of looking at it. Physically, it's in the ground. As no one would disagree, that means it's existing is right there. The other part of existing is, and this is the stretch, this is a judgment call on, is it funded and going to be built in a reasonable period of time? So the question is, for example, if it is not physically built, but it's fully funded, it's under design, it's going to be constructed this year or next year, should we view it as a missing, non-existing, or should we reflect it as existing, proposed, going to be built? In the purest sense, I would agree that existing means that it's physically in place. I can walk out and I can walk on it right now. Proposed, which is also one of them, proposed sidewalk under the proposed future facilities, is also used to indicate it's proposed, may not be fully funded, but we are pursuing the grant funds for it. Realistically, whatever we put in there today is going to be outdated next year. If we put it in as existing and then proposed, but we know we've got the funding for it, next year is going to be built. Then the plan is, as soon as we adopt the plan, it's out of date. If we're following that kind of a philosophy. I'm easy either way. We decided to make our best judgment. If something is fully funded and it's in the plan and we're going to be building it in the next year to 2 years, we're going to call it as there. Perhaps that's wrong. That's fine. We can go and we can relook at some of those projects. I do want to mention one thing, go back to one thing you said, Military Road. Military Road, we're looking really strong. Looks like we're going to get funding for doing all the design on that this year. So we pulled it because it is no longer an unfunded project. It is getting funding. So military, from where we finished right at Edgewood up to 112th, is going to be funded for design. That was something that was not anticipated. We only found out fairly recently when we were approached by the Puget Sound Regional Council staff saying, hey, we've got 30-some million we need to reallocate. Do you have any of your projects on the contingency list you want to move forward? And we looked at it and we said, can we move forward just design? And they said, yeah, we're willing to do that because they need to spend a lot of money and get it out there. So as soon as we get the final confirmation, which should be shortly, we will be seeking consultant services to start the design on that project. If I remember correctly, it's $600,000-700,000 with like a $48,000 city match. Pretty small. Military design, yeah, that's doing all that. You had mentioned Steilacoom Boulevard between Custer and, if I'm remembering correctly, Bridgeport. The challenge
Just between Custer and down to where Gravelly Lake
Drive
comes in, there's two segments where there are not sidewalks.
And you're 100% correct. There is nothing in there. And part of the reason why is because there's not enough room. Because for the road section we need in there, we're going to have to do an awful lot of right-of-way acquisition in order to build even just the sidewalks on both sides. Is it something we can add to this project, this list? Absolutely. But just recognizing that adding it to this does not mean that it's going to be something that's going to be built in the near future for quite some time. In fact, until we might possibly, like we did on a couple of other projects, come forward and request design funds so we can take it at least to a concept to figure out what we need to build. That has worked successfully for us on Union Avenue. We did that with council approval. We did the conceptualized design and we were able to successfully obtain $500,000 of grant funding from TIB for building sidewalks on the south side. We have 17 properties on that particular project, by the way, that we have to acquire right away from because we're going to only go on the north side based on council ordinance from some time ago. So it's a strategy that we're trying to pursue on every one of these projects, trying to fit the city's needs for the sidewalks and the locations with the funding that we sometimes struggle to find. I agree. There are additional projects. We could probably look at this and we could say, well, add this or add that section here. Okay, we can add them to the non-motorized transportation plan. It's a policy document. And rest assured that when we are looking at our grant funding agencies, we are looking for any project that will connect to and work for them on their grants and making us eligible. So we're not limited just to a particular list.
I have a quick question on the opportunity that came up with PSRC. So if money comes available for study money, or not study money, but design money, for instance, I completely understand and support the military road piece. But if we have projects, let's say in 24, 25, that we know we have councilmanic bonds for, I'm thinking like we often do with the general fund and we try to save that money. Is there a way to take some of that money for design for those projects that we know we're going to spend money on design for, get that done, save some of the money for another project, and then expedite getting design done and maybe construction done sooner? We already know it's funded for construction.
Mayor, I like the way you think. However, we have to apply every 2 years to the PSRC TCC process. If the project has not been applied for, scored, and ranked, then you cannot bring it into consideration. The other challenge we have is that we do not put in for projects that are fully funded because they will not be considered. It's the same thing for Transportation Improvement Board. They do not and will not supplant funding you have from other sources in order to round out your project. So we go forward to the PSRC, the TIB, Safe Routes to Schools, et cetera, and safety grants, only for projects where we know we need funding, because they will reject us otherwise.
Understood. Certainly, I was thinking that funding could then go toward another project, right? That way you have dedicated stream, but I get it.
Like I said, I like your thinking, but unfortunately, it just doesn't work for us.
Called a show game.
Yeah, well, I do think that consistency between this plan and the comprehensive plan is important. In 2024, we're doing a major update of the comprehensive plan. I think that in the comprehensive plan, there is a listing of key pedestrian routes that doesn't totally match what this update came up with. And if like that stretch of Stillicum Boulevard is, there is no practical way to build it to Civic Boulevard standards, that then we should be looking at getting something submitted for the 2024 comp plan update to adjust the key pedestrian routes and perhaps clarify the expectations and the target for how we're going to develop our arterials, because we're about 85% done with the 2 decades of work on our arterials that we have done really well with that. They're pretty well. I mean, look at in particular the work over the past 5 years, where we've done things on Gravelly Lake Drive and Washington Boulevard and Veterans and in Onyx, or where we're doing. I mean, the community is really happy with the quality of the projects. The community is perhaps more patient than the council is to be able to go and do that. But I would take this plan and hold it up against the comp plan to see if there are some changes that should be made to the comp plan based upon realities that this update disclosed. Okay, to be able to go and do that rather than just leave the comp plan to be what it is and say this is more current. So that's just to be able to go and do that. And then I'll add one more project that's on there because of that, to do that is maybe very foggy, but that we were as a council, we really went through to say that we want something we want to happen within the next 20 years. When we did the downtown area sub-area plan, the major pedestrian non-motorized transportation element of that was get ownership of Lakewood Town Center Boulevard and then put sidewalks and bike paths and that and make it on both ends of the key way to get into the town center. And I think that if it's in the downtown plan and you're putting it here, that's the stage for perhaps a long time from now of getting the money, because in order to get 59th Avenue, we're still paying for 59th Avenue. I think we got another 2 years to pay that off. But even though we don't own the road yet, we really have identified that as a project that's really important for non-motorized pedestrian mobility, but also for the full evolution of what we want in the town center. And we should put it in wherever we can that'll allow us to be able to highlight it and ask for money. So I'll just ask you I just got one last question that I wanted to ask because it didn't really get addressed directly, although I can see it indirectly in the final plan. And that was when we did our statement on equity and inclusion as a city. And we said that as we do our planning, we're going to take note of that as we're doing it. And I guess, are you satisfied that the consultant and we have done that adequately in this update of the plan?
I am.
That's all that I have, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Enough clarity on some extra direction there? You're comfortable with what you've received tonight?
I'm comfortable with the conversation. Not sure I have direction. I will tell you that on Silicon Boulevard, I would not recommend pulling anything out of the comp plan as far as the vision for that. We're engineers, as we like to say. If you bring a big enough checkbook, we will build you anything you want. What we have right now is inadequate right of way, and getting the right of way is going to be very costly because it will require demolition of some buildings and taking of people's backyards. So right now, I'm hesitant to say, well, we should just ignore that. But I am hesitant to say, let's put it in there right now because it's going to be an indication that we're going to be able to build that at some time. Not for this iteration. The next iteration will have more idea of what we can cannot do on that. The Green Street loops, it's a great vision, but I'll be frank with you, I've read through that thing, I've gone through it. It's got some real structural issues for us on how we're going to build those non-motorized components. We have cross sections that are 113 feet wide to build everything, and we got 60-foot right away. Well, we've got some major structures, including a bank. In order to make that work, we got to take out. I don't think that's necessarily the vision. The idea is that private development will pay for 50% of that. It's a good idea, but it's not been working so far. And we'll wait to see what happens. There's new owners for the downtown mall area here. They seem to be more cooperative, but I'm not involved in those conversations. Should they decide that they want to dedicate the area for a road, which they're not required to do if they don't make any major changes, if they decide to do that and we go build a road in there, I will just caution you, it will not be inexpensive because the curb gutter sidewalk that we will put in will stop the parking lot from flowing the way it currently does, because we have to control access onto public roads where they don't have to control access coming out of the parking areas into a private thoroughfare. It's not a road, it's a thoroughfare. There's also a number of projects on that Green Street Loop that was originally listed. We've built them. We've completed them, but we continue to pursue grant funds. For example, the traffic signal right off of Gravy Lake Drive. The challenge for us on that is in order to get grant funds, there have to be a history of accidents. There aren't. So far we have been unsuccessful getting any agency to agree to give us grant funds to build a signal there. We also have submitted for a RAISE grant that you're aware of. We're waiting to hear on that. That will give us a more comprehensive evaluation and look at all the streets within the downtown core. And it will also enable us to determine what we need to do from a transportation perspective and set us up for going after future grant funds, both federal funds and state funds, in order to accomplish the vision. So those are my final thoughts on this. Was there something in particular that the council would like us to do to modify the update to the non-motorized transportation plan?
Other than the Meadow Road comment we had, Mr. Anderson, and then Mr. Branson had.
Yeah, well, I'd like to commend you and staff over the years of doing a remarkable job of cobbling together funds from any variety of sources to accomplish our desire to have curbs, gutters, and sidewalks in an urban area. So we're a city and not a wide spot on a county road. And from my perspective, after 15+ years on the council, I have never met anyone in the community who told me that they read one of these plans. So my goal and generic request for change, if there needs to be change, is to make sure that these documents are drafted in a way that they provide the greatest flexibility to staff to be innovative and to react to funding opportunities. So that if, like the 6-year tip, it needs to be in the plan to apply for the grant, make sure it's on the list, even though we today don't think there is a realistic chance of funding because it just might happen. So I guess that's my 50,000 square foot approach to it rather than precision flexibility. And so I've watched you folks over the years do a remarkable job with that. I'd like you to keep it up. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening.
Last on our agenda tonight is a very brief conversation for Mr. Lauricell's benefit of the existing appointments to the Citizen Advisory Board committees and commissions. So if you take a look briefly at page 201 of your packet, get to that. Get it? So that will give a recitation of our various committees and boards. And so since we no longer have I don't think Ms. Farmer was on many of them, was she? So the question is whether there's something of interest or passion for you, Mr. Lauricella, that you could arm wrestle or twist another council member to perhaps move to the side and allow you to fulfill one of your dreams of a committee liaison position. So we certainly are here about dream fulfillment.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. As you know, I joined this council to fulfill my dream.
There you go.
in the city.
Exactly.
I've had the opportunity to go to a couple of the boards and commissions. I hope to attend more to get a better understanding of how things operate. Mr. Brandstetter has, or Councilmember Brandstetter has invited me to attend the Public Safety Advisory Committee. And that was very interesting. It seemed very important to our community. So if that opportunity was there, even as a co-liaison, I'd be interested in that.
Okay.
I also would be interested in the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board if that opportunity was there, again, as a co-liaison at first, if that is amenable.
There's certainly nothing that precludes any one of us from attending any one of these commission meetings. And in fact, several council members do on occasion sit in.
Right.
Like the neighborhood association meetings, just because the public enjoys seeing you, but there's usually one liaison, but that could make some sense. We could either, it depends on Mr. Brandstetter's thoughts on the public safety one, or Mr. Anderson's on parks, but those likely will be reshuffled anyway at the end of this calendar year after our November election, because there are 3 positions that are up for election. And so we usually do this consideration in January following the election, but it doesn't preclude us from doing it now. Mr. Boki.
I would say, Mr. Mayor, I have had a very difficult time integrating the Landmarks and Heritage Advisory Board. Ends up on the 4th Thursday, so I think that was last week, but it somehow ended up with PCRC or, which I thought is 3rd. I just never make that. I've made it like once on Zoom.
Okay.
So if that's a time he thinks he can make it, they're fairly short meetings. But I just have not done that group justice. I don't feel. I'm able to integrate the planning commission, but I'm just having a real difficult time with LHAB.
Got it? There's one opportunity.
Sure, I'd be, again, happy to help in any capacity for any of the boards.
Certainly. Mr. Branstetter, did you have some feedback on public safety?
Oh, I would certainly be willing to step off of the public safety as their liaison. It's a group that only meets 6 times a year. It's going on off. The other committee that I'm doing that I would want to try to balance is just in the interim, early part of this year, I've been attending the Community Services Advisory Board that was previously Council Member Farmers was a liaison to. I'm willing to continue to be the liaison to that board or not. If I was, I think I'd like then for someone to have take over being the liaison to the youth council. But I'm willing to do either one, just would prefer that I not have to do both, because the South Sound 911 board is actually more meetings than it shows on this chart. And I'm pretty well into 4 meetings a month between subcommittees and the board and the other things. At least for now, I'm willing to be Mr. Boke's alternate on the SHAPE executive committee. I've only had to do that once, although I'm going to have to do that for the next one, I guess. So that's go. I can go to those meetings, just show up sporadically, and then create problems for Mr. Boke to solve at the next meeting.
Okay, so just so I have some clarity in my own mind, so what are you interested in shuffling over or not to Mr. Larcella?
I'm interested in letting him have the public safety liaison role, but I would like someone to take either the youth council for next school year. I mean, I've only got 2 meetings of the liaison with the current council, but I look like for someone in September to be willing to pick up being the liaison for the next school year with the youth council. And having done that, then I'm willing to stay on these till the end of this year with the community services folks, and they started their process of, which is an annual one.
Okay, so it sounds like public safety. Mr. Larcella will assume those roles, and I heard Ms. Bell interested in assuming the youth council liaison role when it's up in September.
Yeah, after June.
Yep. In June. Think about LHAB. Well, we can certainly load Mr. Larcella up with LHAB just because that's the short straw, and maybe you're it.
Yeah, can do that. I would also be interested in helping out with the youth council as a graduate from Clover Park School District and an attendee of Pierce College and doing the whole running start thing. I talked to some of the kids at the Parks Appreciation Day about their experiences with it. It was great to be able to share similar backgrounds. So I'd be interested in helping out.
There's no reason why we can't have an alternate position on that, on the youth council, and that way either one or both of you can attend, and then when one isn't present, the other can be. I don't think there's a problem there. So, Mr. Anderson.
Just maybe as an item of information, and this could be some of this could be for the city clerk as much as anybody. I'm happy where I am. I've cut back after stepped down as mayor, and weaned out, but I have a good authority that my positions are going to be open soon. One couple of things I'd note on the chart here, Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Committee was actually an appointment of this body. So that's where it comes from. We get one voting member since their last reallocation. And the other thing that isn't here, but I learned from day job, LTAC, the lodging tax. We've always assumed, since it was Doug Richardson and then me, and then passed on to you, that the mayor was ex officio, essentially the chair of that. That's not what the statute says. The statute says that there are equal numbers from at least 5 members, at least equal numbers from the receivers and the payers, and that a member of the municipality's legislative body is the chair. So that's something that I don't recommend changing, but I recommend appointing so that we actually include that and so we comply with the statute. It came up but if we in the county, what if we don't want anybody on the council to be the person, or they don't want to do it? So we looked at it, and it says doesn't have to be the chair. So in fact, in the county, it isn't. So anyway, that's my comment.
Very good. We can have Ms. Walker double check that, but I don't mind serving whether appointed or not in that, since I've only done it 1 year. It's not a bad thing to do. It's 1 meeting a year. We can always double check that. Okay, good. So it looks like we got some clarity on that. We've got Laura Sella, who's doing public safety and the alternate to youth council. And Heritage, I'll have it. Yeah, Landmarks and Heritage Advisory Board. Yeah, it's perfect for you. You can decide whether Bridgeport Way should be in brown or green or both. And you get the. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a good thing. If you stack them, and if you're colorblind, it works really well.
As they say, with great power comes great responsibility. So, thank you.
Exactly. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, on a tangentially related topic, a few weeks ago, and doing that, it talked about the fact that 5 of the 7 members on the planning commission term expire at the end of 2023.
Right.
And that they are actually in the midst of a 2-year project to do the major review and update of the comp plan that has to be done by the end of 2024. I ask that maybe, rather than hoping that majority of those 5 apply to be for complete new terms, as to whether there is a process to offer them an extension of a year to be able to finish the 2024 work, given that that work plan is there, or we'll end up next year having some new members and maybe a significant number of new members to be able to go and do that. But I don't know if Mr. Boki got any reaction from any of the members as to whether they'd be interested in an extension, or whether we want to formally ask them if it's
We should probably
allowable to do that. I think it would make for having a consistent commission dealing with what is a very major piece of work.
I think it'd be appropriate for Mr. Boki as a liaison to ask him, don't you think, at the next meeting, then bring that feedback back to us?
I'll lay it right out there. I'd quit before I'd vote for Paul Wagaman to spend an extra day on that commission. He's embarrassed the city. He's embarrassed himself. He has disparaged the majority of the inhabitants of the community with his racist views and outrageous public and private comments. And I would look for a way to get him kicked off, but he hasn't committed essentially impeachable offenses sitting in the office of being a planning commissioner. So I think putting out a general invitation to extend would be very inappropriate.
Well, certainly, it's always subject to our appointment, right? Even if they expressed interest, we don't have to appoint for any number of reasons. What's the thought here on how you want to do that? Make them formally submit an interest?
Yeah, I mean, they all, well, let me think about it, but I think that they have to re-up. They're aware of the situation. They've been made aware by staff that or whatever are going on.
And I don't recall just procedurally. Ms. Schumacher can correct me, but do we tend to try to do that 6 months out, 3 months out? What's been our protocol on that? Because we don't just allow it come and go without trying to appoint somebody before the expiration of their term.
Mayor, typically we do advertisement for upcoming vacancies about 12 weeks in advance or about 3 months in advance.
Okay. Well, in the absence of that, there you go. So we've got, probably a September timeframe to advertise for vacancies, and then obviously it'll go through the appointment process. So, okay, you can probably find out in your liaison role, express concern about the work plan, and we just want to make sure there's some consistency, not necessarily 100% consistency perhaps, but some consistency nonetheless. Okay, well, that takes care of that particular action item. On your sheet for tonight, you'll see the items scheduled for the May 1 regular city council meeting. There's quite a few proclamations. And then we have various other items on the consent agenda. So take a look at that as your packet comes. Mr. Caulfield, the floor is yours for reports by the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Few updates. You mentioned proclamations at your upcoming meeting. This body has received requests for 2 more proclamations, and these can be accommodated at the May 1st regular meeting as well, if you wish. The first is from a Lakewood residents requesting that the City Council issue a proclamation recognizing May 12th, 2023 as Child Care Provider Appreciation Month. And then a second one, though, this is a little late. The Tacoma Pierce County Association of Realtors and the Fair Housing Center of Washington are requesting that the City Council issue a proclamation declaring April as Fair Housing Month. You actually did that one last year, April 4th, but it's for the month of April. So I'll leave it to you if you want to issue a proclamation on May 1st. Declaring April as Fair Housing Month. So, Mayor, I'll leave those 2 items with you.
Okay.
The Lakewood Light and Power is having their annual meeting here in the City Council chambers on this Thursday at 6:30. I think they'll have a little social at beginning about 6 p.m. or so. I'm going to be giving a very brief State of the City address, but given that the city is a member of Lakeview Light and Power, typically this body identifies somebody to be a voting delegate. And I know usually Councilmember Branstetter, Councilmember Bell are attending and Councilmember Laura Sella. So maybe you want to, I don't know, do rock, scissors, paper on that if you're going to be attending. So, but the purpose of the voting is to vote for their board of directors. So that's again, Mayor, I'll leave that with you in terms of who you would like from the City Council to be the voting delegate. Parks Appreciation Day, I understand was a grand success. I want to recognize Mary Dodsworth, our Parks and Recreation Director, along with her team for helping facilitate this. But most importantly, I want to really thank and, express our appreciation and gratitude for the over 150 volunteers that came out from a number of, not just individuals, but also representing a number of our partner organizations, such as the fire department and the school district, as well as a number of service clubs and the like, and got a lot done. A lot of Ms. Dodsworth reported to me this afternoon that quite a bit of projects were completed. So those volunteers certainly left a lot of sweat equity out in our parks this weekend at Fort Steilacoom Park, Harry Todd Park, Edgewater Park, Kiwanis Park, and Lakewood Community Garden. So, and for those of you who attended, just want to express my thanks as well. I know last week I gave you an update on the community cleanup. We do have a final count on the number of vehicles that came through, and it was 458, which is actually the highest number since the spring of 2021, which was kind of a post-COVID free-for-all that we had in the spring of that year. But again, very well attended, even though we had some significant rain on that Sunday. Last week you heard from our program manager of SSMCP that the Nisqually Indian Tribe is moving to the executive leadership level on SSMCP. And I'm also pleased to report that the city of Puyallup has communicated that they are going to move from general membership up to the steering committee level. And I want to thank Bill Adamson for his leadership and role there in convincing Puyallup, given that they are, the size of their city, but also given the number of veterans and military folks that live in their community. So they're looking forward to participating at that level. The Pierce County Library System, they actually signed the contract with their contractor to construct an interim library. They did that last week after the board had approved it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so they're in the process. They might have already done this, submitting their drawings and their final drawings and engineering plans and the like to the city. And they hope to get underway and break ground here in the near future. And their goal is to hopefully have that interim facility operational by the end of the year. And that's at the intersection or the corner of Gravely Lake Drive and Alpharetta Street Southwest. Police Chief Smith asked me to pass on to you that the LPD Citizens Academy, again, they're going to have that this year. It's an 8-week academy. It's going to be on Thursday evenings from beginning on June 8th. Through July 27th. And so they're in the process of pulling all of that material and the community outreach and the like together. There's also going to be a couple of Saturday events, one to incorporate EVOC and DUI training. And then the other, and this is new, virtual reality firearms scenario training. And I actually had an opportunity to take advantage of this several months ago. And to say it's real is a bit of an understatement. It is very, very real and a great training tool that our police department has as well. So we're going to be making that available as part of this academy as well. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the state legislative session. So state legislature, they adjourned their 105-day long session on Saturday evening. They have adopted an operating budget, a capital budget, and a transportation budget. The operating budget is approaching, the biennial operating budget is approaching $70 billion. I was reflecting on that because for some reason I remember when it was $23.3 billion. And that was probably a long time ago, but to me, it doesn't seem like a long time ago, but just kind of shows how, the size of, budgets increase over a period of time. Wanted to report that as it relates to, this body's policy direction, you did very, very well in terms of securing the financial proceeds that you had asked us to seek out, particularly $309,000 in support of a partnership with the Nisqually Indian Tribe to make cultural and historic improvements in their name at Fort Steilacoom Park. $500,000 for LASA. Also in the operating, and that was in the capital budget. Also in the operating budget, we once again received $621,000 in support of our community partnership program down at Western State Hospital with our police department. But most importantly, after it's at least 6 years, it might be 8 years, we finally got the budget proviso language to reflect that the city would like how we use that money to be focused on how we provide services as opposed to this is what you have to do and the positions that you have to use. And as you know, we've been seeking that change for a number of years. And I want to actually recognize Senator Nobles for championing that on the Senate side. Also want to recognize Mary Dodsworth and her team for securing $2.1 million in funding for Wards Lake Park Phase 2, as well as another $350,000 for pickleball courts at Harry Todd Park. And of course, our legislators for actually approving the state capital budget of which these line items were in. So some really good news there. And then on the SSMCP front, on the money side, we received $900,000, the city did, for the North Clear Zone through the Defense Community Compatibility Account, which again, the city has been played a key leadership role in not only creating, but also funding. And the state legislature actually funded that to the tune of $38.5 million, of which $900,000 is going to come to the city in the coming biennium, again, for the North Clear Zone. And then we, SSMCP also advocated for $250,000 for a statewide military and defense sector economic impact analysis. And those dollars have been allocated to our good friend Denny Heck, Lieutenant Governor, whose office is actually going to be taking the lead on championing this exercise. And SSMCP will be a very active partner in that analysis as well, just given our familiarity with how the military works here in Washington State. So from that perspective, outstanding news. And again, that's a reflection of your policy objectives that you have established. And it's a reflection of the relationship and the ongoing communication that you have with your state legislators. And as I like to say, or you hear me say, this doesn't happen by accident. And so overall, over $5 million that the city has been able to secure from our state legislators. So great work there. Another key objective was in the area of public safety, particularly in the area of vehicular pursuits. The good news there, they made some progress. They did make some changes to allow police officers to engage in vehicular pursuits, to allow an officer, if there's reasonable suspicion that a person in the vehicle has or is committing a violent crime, a sex offense, a vehicular assault offense, an escape, a DUI or a DV assault in the first, second, or actually any DV assault. So that's good news. However, at the same time, there's a long list of other crimes that are not included in there. So I would phrase this as, okay, that's a good start, but we have some work to be done there, particularly as it relates to Lakewood in the areas of motor theft, organized retail theft, and residential burglaries. But really, that's 281 cities and towns are experiencing that as well. And so I would imagine that this is something that this body is going to want to continue to focus on and bring back next session and upcoming sessions to continue working with our legislators to get these necessary fixes to ensure that our communities are safe and secure. The other one that did not make it across the finish line is the Blake decision. And we understand that perhaps the governor is going to call a special session in June to address that. In the interim, our city attorney, she has already started working on potentially bringing back an ordinance to this body to address the issue of possession of drugs. And she was talking to me earlier and saying the council did do something about a year or so ago, and so she's working on that, but you can expect us to come back with something probably in the very near future again to address that. She's also reaching out to a number of other cities to see what they're doing. And a number of cities are actually beginning to have that same thought process that they need to do something sooner rather than waiting on the state to do something. I did want to share with you that, the Senate bill was a good bill. And I know I talked about that before, and it was succinct. It was to the point. It was something that, our attorneys and both on the prosecuting side and on the defense side felt that was clear. It was understandable. It could be enforced. And it was very straightforward. The House bill, however, it was a little convoluted. And what we were hearing from the attorneys, again, both on the defense side and on the PA side, was that it was creating way too much uncertainty. And that was one of the reasons why, and we're not the only city, a number of cities adamantly opposed the House bill. The other was because it only made it a misdemeanor possession. However, they did change that and amended it to a gross misdemeanor. However, the implementation of it was it was not clear cut. And so that's why. So the good news is the House did not pass that bill. And it didn't pass for a couple of reasons. There was one side of the argument that folks voted against it because they objected to creating criminal penalties for the possession of controlled substances. That was one argument why some folks on one side of the aisle voted against it. The other was that some other folks felt that the bill would not create functional consequences to motivate individuals to enter into and complete treatment, just given the challenges of being able to successfully, prosecute the crime. So again, we do believe, and I've had a chance to, reach out and talk to a handful of cities today, and they're actually happy that it didn't pass. Now, the bad news is that we have nothing right now as we, lead up to, June 30th, July 1st timeframe. But again, if the legislature does not do something in a special session, that's why we're coming back with something for your consideration here sooner rather than later. Another bill that we were following, and again, this is something as it relates to local control, it's not something that you're mandated to do, which is what local governments want, was adjusting the 1% property tax cap and having that's something that AWC and again, cities and towns would like some flexibility with, and having it tied to a combination of population growth and inflation, but no more than 3%. That did not make it across the finish line, but I would expect that AWC and others are going to be bringing that up as we look out into the future as well. One that did make it across the finish line, and it was something that we strongly advocated for, was some tax increment financing fixes, particularly clarifying the definition that that private investments could be made on state or local government-owned property. And that actually relates to the washed-off property out on Pacific Highway. You might recall a couple of years ago when finally TIF was passed, there was some oversight, and that language somehow got taken out, and it shouldn't have. And so the good news is that this session, our legislators put it back in, so that's going to be helpful for us moving forward if and when there's opportunities out there to utilize that tool. I mentioned the Defense Community Compatibility Account, or as Senator Conway likes to call it, the BRAC prevention bill to help our military installations here in Washington State. So that is now authorized as state law. But most importantly, the state legislature allocated $35.5 million for this current biennium. That's, and if you recall, that's the state's version of the federal government's DCIP, the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, again, which the city of Lakewood was instrumental in creating. So we've been instrumental in creating both the federal law and now the state law, and getting funding in both. And again, we're getting $900,000 for our North Clear zone. I also want to recognize one of our representatives, Representative Levitt, who really championed, along with Maria Tobin, our SSMCP coordinator, for championing the Military Spouse Employment Act, as well as 4 compact agreements for military spouses as they come into Washington State. So just some great news there. And then lastly, on the SSMCP front, the final transportation budget does include additional funding in the area of design and NEPA-CEPA review for the Nisqually Delta project, which is a great partnership that SSMCP, the city of Lakewood, a number of other agencies have with our friends at the Nisqually Indian tribe. So really across the board, some good news there. I would also like to suggest that, right now we're looking at putting together the itinerary from the next upcoming Lakewood Connections magazine. I would strongly recommend that the council corner be focused on, a couple things. One is, okay, this is what we did, what we accomplished with our legislative agenda. But I think also, just being upfront and frank with the community in terms of where your position is as it relates to these public safety bills. Again, as it relates to, you know, the protection of our community, because that is something we are hearing day in and day out. And so, Mayor, I would just kind of plant that seed with you. And I do believe that it will be very, very well received by the Lakewood community if that's something that you do move forward with. So I just wanted to point that out. As it relates to your calendar, I know I mentioned on Thursday evening is Lakeview Light and Power annual meeting. However, the day before on Wednesday morning, the 26th, LASA is having their annual fundraising breakfast at the McGavick Center, and I know several of you will be attending that. The city will have a table there. Also on Friday evening, 14th annual Cops versus Teachers charity basketball game will be down at Lakes High School. Of course, the following week, several of you will be traveling to Gimhae, Republic of Korea, to visit with them and their cultural arts event that they are having. So looking forward to that. While we're gone, those of you who are still back here, May 3rd, annual meeting of the Economic Development Board for Tacoma Pierce County will be at the McGavick Center. City is a key sponsor there, and we'll have a table there as well. And then also while we're gone, May 4th, and I know probably a couple of council members, I know Councilmember Anderson will be representing Lakewood at the annual Remembering Our Heroes, honoring fallen law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty. So, Mayor, that's what I wanted to report. And
Very good. Any questions, Mr. Branstetter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Caulfield, for the report. I am really glad to see that Ms. Tobin and Representative Levitt and that were able to work through and push across the finish line a number of those compacts that have been sort of being pushed uphill for several legislative sessions to be able to go and do that. Because they not only going to help military families and going to be able to do that, but they help some specific sectors in both behavioral health and medical areas that quite frankly we keep hearing about labor shortages. And so I would hope that when we have the elected officials council meeting for SSMCP, that we're going to be able to identify them and any others who did the hard work to push that across to be able to go and do that. With respect to getting a city ordinance in place, even as a contingency, should there not be some legislative action on drug possession, I would say that we would want to be able to pass an ordinance in May so that it can have an effective date of 1 July, given the way things are. And May is a convoluted schedule for our meetings because our regular meetings are May 1st and May 15th, and May 29th is a fifth Monday to be able to go and do that. But I think if we should be prepared to perhaps look at a special meeting on the 22nd or the 29th to deal with an ordinance, and I think we should consider one as a contingency, even if we think there's going to be a special session in June, because if a June special session doesn't result in people getting together, and it sounded like there was an agreement of people in the middle on this House bill, but that there were people on both ends that were more people than there were people in the middle that caused that to do. I know that in our legislators, the 28th district voted in favor of the compromise bill. The 29th district voted in opposition to it. but I don't know that their opposition was consistent with our opposition. That'd be something we can ask them when we see them, particularly if we're able to have our after session legislative meeting with them before a June special session. And that goes forward to looking to be able to go and do that.
Any other questions? Ms. Bell was bringing up some good work in Kent, jumping on that exact thing with a proposed ordinance involving not just public use, but possession. So she'll provide that. And I'm sure Ms. Walker is looking at examples from around other jurisdictions. Mr. Anderson?
You know, I think maybe I oversimplify it because I've been away from criminal law for over 40 years. If you just slide the word knowingly in the old state statute and make it a gross misdemeanor in Lakewood, I think we got it, or we're close enough. And I agree with Mr. Brandstetter that should be done on an expedited basis, both because we probably will need it and because kind of got a roll going here with the publicity we've had on our no camping ordinance and our public use ordinance. So if we add another one to it, it sends a message both to criminals and to our constituents that we take these matters seriously.
Agreed. Looks like we've got consensus. Anything else on this side of the room? You guys good with that?
I was just gonna say, I also agree with both of you and that we should move on this right away.
Very good. Thanks. Okay, thank you, Mr. Caulfield. We'll now turn briefly to council comments. We do have an executive session later tonight, so keep that in mind. Mr. Lauricella, you're next. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first wanted to recognize the folks who participated in the Parks Appreciation Day. It was a great turnout, as Mr. Caulfield mentioned, specifically Scott McKay, who we recognized on the March 20th meeting for his work cleaning up our community. He was out there working very hard and coordinating a lot of the folks as a volunteer. So I appreciated that. And Mary Dodsworth and the rest of the Parks Department also did an excellent job. The community cleanup event, I have been told by a number of residents that they really appreciated that. And we're very thankful for that being set up so they could participate. And that's all for today.
Very good. Councilmember Bell.
I am good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Brandstetter.
This Wednesday, I have one of those South Sound 911 board meetings, so I won't make it to the LASA luncheon, being able to go and do that. But I was wondering who is going so that I can, I'll give the deputy mayor a check because I plan to do that. I just, you're not going to be there to turn it in myself to be able to go and do that. And I am planning to attend in 2 weeks the law enforcement memorial event that is going to be over there along with I'm sure the representatives from the chief and our departments, but it's always that's always a great event. Regarding the two proclamations that the city manager mentioned potentially, I'm not really in favor of passing a proclamation in May retroactively reflecting the April as something. So I think I'd either want to pass on that or designate May as the affordable housing month in Lakewood. I don't know what's magic about April about it anyway, other than that's what they asked. And I'm also, I think I'm supportive of making a proclamation and recognizing the early learning teachers and the folks that are in the childcare thing. But I would note that the Lakewood resident that requested that we do that proclamation for that day is not herself a childcare provider. So that if we were going to do that, we'd need to find an appropriate person to be the recipient. You know, and we have Pierce College where they have a significant training program for childcare providers, and we have a plethora of childcare providers in the city. So I don't think that'll be too hard. I think the lady that requested the proclamation is a childcare consumer. When I asked her, she said, no, she wasn't a provider, but she just really values the work that childcare providers do and was aware of that piece. So, I mean, that's my thought on the two proclamations.
Very good. Just to comment on the fair housing, that came to me, I was probably a little late putting that forward, probably came to me mid-month. The way that the proclamation reads is it doesn't recognize April as Fair Housing Act month. It just talks about recognizing the 55th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. So I think it's not, I think Brianna did a good job of wordsmithing on that if need be. So, and because it's from the Realtors Association, I would like us to do that because they're supportive. Any other questions on that? I'm open in the air if there's consensus not to do the childcare one, but we're pushing childcare as a big military issue. So. Oh, good. In the absence of rampant consternation, we'll go ahead and just do all of them really quickly because that gives each of us one to do.
It wasn't gonna name the month.
It doesn't name the month.
Okay.
It's the 55th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act.
Right, that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Councilmember Anderson.
Just like to thank y'all for stepping up to pay SSMC dues at a rate higher than the city of Tacoma, which pled poverty and said it couldn't pay the extra $1,000 this year.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Interesting. Councilmember Boki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too enjoyed Parks Appreciation Day. I went to Edgewater Park. It's a park in need of a lot of work. Had a lot of good folks, a lot of young backs showed up. A Young Life group, so they brought like a dozen people or more, 15 people, really helped, but there's a lot of work to be done in that park.
Edgewater.
Yeah, a lot of blackberries, and we took out a lot, and there's a lot left, but I really enjoyed it, and I really do appreciate the participation of the community. The Cops versus Teachers game, very big deal. You know, Baron, if you've ever met Baron Coleman, he's a Lakes 1981 Lakes High School grad. He's been doing this for quite some time. He works up at Lakes and I believe he's still in special education, and really a labor of love and really very important. And I haven't been there in a while, and I'm planning to be there and if you can make it on Friday, I think he'd really appreciate it. PCRC meeting last week, and I'll speak to it, I guess, Mr. Mayor. Interesting meeting. Bruce Stanmeyer, the county executive, spoke. Ed Troyer, the sheriff, spoke. And then we had a presentation by planning folks from the county and whoever else is on that group, GMCC. And they talked about this housing tool. So we've had this presentation from Ms. Spear, where the state has now said, yeah, you got to get so many places under the Growth Management Act, provide so much new housing. Now you have to provide it by income level. And they created a tool, and now I'm forgetting the name. It's the something housing tool.
Yeah.
What it has a nice
HAPT or something.
Yeah, HAPT. Okay, so they've been fiddling with it. And since we probably had our last presentation from Ms. Spear, we actually now would need to provide 331 less units than what they originally were telling us over the time frame, and I can't remember the time frame. And I'd say 331. That's what's sticking in my head. But here's the issue. A number of other cities are going to have to do less units, which is interesting math. When they put it up on the screen, it was like, oh, we're doing a few less units. Bonnie Lake is do half as many units. It doesn't even match to what they probably have to do under the Growth Management Act and under the PCRC Vision 2050. So all these guys were, oh yeah, this is great, but then the part of unincorporated Pierce County, the urban area within the UGA will have to do like 12,000 more units. So essentially the HAP tool pushes tons of growth out into the unincorporated parts of Pierce County. Not sure how that's going to go over with the county council. And although I think their initial reaction wasn't good. So I think that there's and there's all these clearly disagreements breaking out. So that on that half, it looks like, oh, gee, we'll have 300 and something less units. Don't know where those are at. The other half of it, though, and I know we talked to Ms. Spear mentioned it when she was here last time, is this equal versus fair share, A and D, and the GMCC is recommending fair share, right? I don't know if that helps us or hurts us, so we'll have to get an update on that also. And they want to kind of move on it. Although they didn't give an example, they gave the HAP tool numbers, but they didn't give the fair share, equal share argument. So they just said they're recommending fair share. I haven't seen any numbers behind that and how that impacts the city. I think they're thinking PCRC is going to approve it like next month or something. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think next month or June or something. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe by June. The last thing I want to leave us with is the legislature passed that, the governors, I believe, signed the whole. It's not statewide zoning because they only pick on certain cities between 25,000, 75,000, and 75,000 and up. So a lot of smaller cities were exempted from densification. I call to your attention an article in the Seattle Times that is exactly, I mean, I'm remarkable that in this day and age, someone would actually write it, but they actually wrote and they looked at how it will impact Seattle and realized that large sections of the city, all wealthy, were exempt, right? So we get, when we talk to the legislature, our legislative delegation, I just want us to get over this DEI charade they put on, right? This idea that we're actually concerned about this, right? Because then they write laws that they know or have a negative impact on poor neighborhoods. They do this and knowingly. They knew that. We were told that that we exempt areas. We're going to have areas exempt, mainly wealthy areas here in this community. And then the Seattle Times rightly writes, oh, gee whiz, here's all these country clubs and, oh, half a shoreline, all that overlooks they're exempt also. So
some of those are restrictive covenants that they decided that they couldn't overrule.
Correct.
Legislative action.
Correct.
Smartly.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, the Supreme Court has said you can't have racially restrictive covenants. I mean, I don't think you would defend that, but But they're there and that's a reality and they knew that and they overshot that because they knew the impact wouldn't be in the neighborhoods where they get their money from. So I'll just leave it at that. But if you haven't had a chance to read the article, you should.
Mr. Brownstetter.
Yeah, I just had a question, Paul. When they were discussing numbers and how many more units you had to plan for to be able to go and do that, did they discuss how the impact about if you had to take sections of your city and move them from single family to duplex, whether those additional numbers count towards your 2050 goal?
Well, I don't know, but I guess we could try that, right? We could just say, well, 2 and 4, or we could just say 4 on every residential lot in the city and say, see, we've made
We're
it.
done.
And then take whole sections of
Yeah.
areas that are currently multifamily and just say, well, you know. it's a best-
And I know our consideration as a city has been over time is that we don't really consider covenants. And it apparently is now going to force us to know about covenants if covenants are what is going to be trigger areas being exempt.
Well, the article mentioned you have till July to put in covenants. So theoretically, as a city, we could start slapping stuff in.
A little bit different view on that. I live in a covenanted area which allows ADUs, by the way. But the city could not research, apply the numbers, and it's up to the people with covenants to object. And the real objection is that it's a taking. I have property that says my neighbor can't have multifamily. My neighbor can't do this, my neighbor can't do that. And if the government comes in and by law retroactively says, no, you have to do those things, they're taking away a property right that you need to pay for. So it's not that they're necessarily exempt in a true exemption fashion. It's that the law can't be effectively, the change can't be effectively applied to them because the government won't do it because they can't afford to do it. You can't tell Bill Gates that he has to have 300 units on his lot because his neighbor has a right to tell him he can't have anything but what he's got. So it's another example of the state legislature's either ignorance or willful disdain of property rights.
Right. And that would be my point. The point isn't to force all these places that have covenants. The point is they shouldn't have done it because they knew that it was an inequitable law. It's absolutely an inequitable law. I don't know that since I've lived in the state of Washington, since I've been here, that I've ever seen a law that was actually more inequitable than the housing law they just passed. And so that's why that's just another reason to oppose it. Because I agree that folks who have the covenants have property rights, but
it's to digress a minute. We mentioned the Puget Sound Regional Council that I attend. And it's that same attitude is pervasive in many policies. And for 9 years, I preceded Mayor Whalen on the Pierce Transit Board. The way mass transportation funding is distributed routinely works to underfund or give a disproportionately smaller amount of the allocation that comes through that federal funding to Pierce Transit. Pierce Transit has lifeline services in underserved communities. It's what the basic public transportation needs to provide, not wants to provide. And they would start the meeting with equity arguments and virtue signaling. And when it comes to vote, say you're taking millions away from Pierce Transit and other entities that actually serve underserved populations. And you're using your discretion to give it to Sound Transit so they can build a tunnel in an expensive neighborhood. It's a, you want equity, vote for it. Doesn't work. I mean, you pick up the outliers around the edge and you lose. They do that on virtually every policy. They virtue signal, and then when it comes to the vote, they go the other way. But we digress.
Roki?
Well, it's just the start of, if we're gonna deal with this correctly, and they've now passed this, what I feel is bad law. That we're gonna have to deal with it, and we're gonna have to come up with ways to make sure that the city of Lakewood, we're gonna have to try to minimize the impacts of densification. And that's gonna mean to do some courageous things to make sure that our neighborhoods are not adversely impacted anymore than what they will be anyway.
We do have the tree preservation code that's going to help.
We do have tree preservation code, but I'm talking about things like making sure that there's street front improvements. I think it's time to talk about a parks impact fee. We've got a lot of apartments going up that are going to be outside the parks impact fee, but if we're going to densify, we've got to create opportunities for recreation, and we're just not going to have the money to do that. And the legislature didn't oppose that. They didn't say you can't do that. So.
Good point. Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did attend the ribbon cutting ceremony for Coleman Moving, and I would like to compliment our mayor. He did an excellent job with this opening statement. Excuse me. One thing that I walked away with that was that the leadership that talked about it. They said that you've been to many of these ribbon cuttings, but they've never had the turnout that they had in Lakewood. So kudos to us. Tonight, I attended the Friend Raising event, and that's the event that's going to take place of the Making Strides Walk for Cancer and DuPont. And I had a long conversation with the mayor of DuPont, and we had a conversation on how do we define affordable housing. And they're struggling just like we are. So just to say, we can say it, but is it really there? On Saturday, it was the first Parks Appreciation Day I've missed in quite a while, but I had a wonderful trip to Mount Vernon, and I did the tour of the tulip fields. I was thinking about you guys. Thank you.
Did you tiptoe through the
I
tulip fields?
tiptoed through the
Did you?
tulip, but I had to pay $20 to do that.
Yeah. Very good. Just briefly, I did the Coleman Moving Chamber Open House and Ribbon Cutting event on Wednesday. As the Deputy Mayor indicated, it was a really great event. Kudos to our economic development staff and our permitting and planning folks, because they were laudatory in their comments about how Lakewood really came to the forefront to get this project off the ground. It was a year ago, approximately a year ago in a week, that I think some of us attended a dirt, whatever, what do you call that thing? Groundbreaking ceremony. And then a year later, this 120,000 square foot facility is up and running. Lots of employees we met. They're happy to have jobs. Coleman's happy to be here. They picked this location from really a nationwide search. They were really happy to find the location near JBLM. So it was a really good event. And then we immediately proceeded to go to the North Lakewood Neighborhood Association meeting at Oak Brook. Several of us attended that as well. It was a well-attended meeting by, I would think, 35, 40 residents. Mary Dodsworth did a fantastic presentation on all things parks and parks events, and the people were very receptive to that. We received some nice feedback and comments about public safety that we're on top of, and a few little minor comments that I passed along to the manager about requests for some stop signs here and there in Oak Brook. So, but it was a good meeting and people were very thoughtful. I was glad to be there. Parks Appreciation Day on Saturday, I attended, we did a bunch of work. If you want to know what 50 yards of bark looks like, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, several dump trucks, many truckloads. I was really thankful that my wife was there because she was actually shoveling more than I was, which was even better. It's a good thing. You get your spouse to work, and so I shovel plenty of things at home, but she was shoveling, there. So that was a good event. The Loss of Breakfast is coming up. We have the 500,000 in state capital budget monies. Do we get confirmation on the feds yet on the 2.5? Did we get confirmation on that we can share on the breakfast?
Yes, Mayor. So Congresswoman Strickland has sponsored that as one of her 15 projects. It's been moved forward to the full Congress. So now it's in their hands for their review and consideration probably later this
So we can say
summer
it's
or fall.
Moving forward. Okay, very good. All right, last thing, Lake Gold Gardens. I'm going out on Thursday night. You're all invited. I'm hosting just a little meet and greet event so people can learn more about the pending construction of the Welcome Center and new historically significant carriage house, the project that they're redoing. So come out and have a little appetizer and libation and learn more about that. I'd be happy to host you. And that is all the events that are of importance this week. So City Council will now recess into executive session for approximately 15 minutes pursuant to RCW 423110 sub 1 sub I to discuss with our legal counsel litigation or potential litigation. We won't take any action following the executive session other than to come out here and adjourn the meeting. So we are now in recess.